That was the first question they asked me when I went into the hospital.
Did you lie?
Okay, so the reason I ended up going to the hospital with sepsis is that I had an abscess. I have all these scars on my arm, and I had an abscess right here on my artery. It opened up under my skin. And so the fluid in the abscess traveled down my arm, under my skin, into my hand. And it started turning blue because the circulation was getting cut off, and I had a really high fever. So I go to the emergency room.
And only 1 in 6 survive.
6 out of 10. So 60% survival rate.
Well, welcome to the INNOVAT3 Podcast. This is where we talk about the intersection of social impact and technology with a sprinkling of faith and healthy skepticism. Just meeting you today, but I've been a longtime fan through our mutual friend Darren Norton, and you're a lived experience expert in recovery and an advocate. So introduce yourself.
Yeah, you called it. My name's Tom Wolf. I'm formerly homeless. I'm in recovery from heroin and fentanyl addiction.
Congratulations. How long?
It'll be 7 years on June 24th of this year.
My mom's joke would be, I'm a recovery Pharisee. This did 7 years since I made my last judgment. Yeah. As she was from a, very different background. Okay.
So, and so my story it's for whatever reason, my story became like a thing a few years ago, in my recovery. And then I've been able to kind of roll that into advocacy and activism and trying to make change, not just in San Francisco, but across the country, across the world, to whoever will listen to me. I've used technology to help me with that. And
you're very big on X.
I'm big on X. I got started out, I call myself the accidental advocate. I got started by accident on X with my platform, which I've now built into a pretty good sized platform. I got 31,000 followers, but more than that, that's opened a bunch of other doors for me in regards to opportunities to make policy change, to meet with congressional leaders, U.S. senators, advisors to the president, been to D.C., been to the White House, worked on state legislation, helped inform the new mayor and his team on best practices for their homeless policy and drug policy in San Francisco. All things that 7-8 years ago, if you had asked me were possible, I would have said no, it was absolutely not possible. Yet here I am as living proof that, one, we do recover. Those of us in addiction, we do recover, and that you can find purpose in your life in the second half of your life. Long story to you, I'll be 55 on Sunday.
Wow, so we're the same age until Sunday. I'm 54. I'll be 55 in August.
Okay. So
I like to say 50s are the new 30s.
Well, yeah. It's like we're that Gen X crowd, kind of that. They always joke about that, about how we grew up as latchkey kids and kind of grew up in a different generation. I don't know about all that. All I know is that I, as a human being, did not find my purpose until I found recovery from addiction. As a human, I had a job, I got married, I had kids, but I didn't know who I was supposed to be. And
so, go into your backstory.
Yeah. So, I'm a married father of two, grew up in a pretty good family, but a family here in the area. I'm a San Francisco native.
Okay.
Born in San Francisco, raised between San Francisco and Daly City. So I'm really local, like super local.
I'm from local.
From here, right?
Seeing a lot of changes.
Yeah, a lot of changes. Come from a good family. My parents have been married for 63 years. They're in their late 80s now, still going.
So that's the counter into here.
Yeah, right. But at the same time, I come from a family of alcoholics. So it's generational. My grandfather, my dad, a couple of my siblings are in recovery from alcoholism. And so that addiction gene did not miss me. But the difference is that my addiction manifested with opioids. And that all started in 2015. Early 2015, I was working as a child support officer for the city and county of San Francisco.
Wow. So it was adult addiction.
Yeah, it was adult addiction.
Number 35.
45.
45.
So I was already, I was one of those weekend warrior guys, you have a few drinks during the weekend, but nothing too crazy. Smoked a lot of pot when I was young, in my 20s, In the 80s, you tried a little cocaine, a little acid, this and that, but it was never anything like that became a problem in which my life was not manageable. I would say. But I had to have the
So we think.
So we think, right. But it was already there, right? And the tendency showed in other things like, people joke about how, when you go to Vegas, you get drunk and you lose all your money. Well, I wouldn't just lose all my money. I would run on my credit card and do cash advances to gamble too. So I knew that those tendencies were already there, right?
So the addiction also showed in gambling.
Yeah, it showed in gambling, but not to the extent that it ended up manifesting with opioids, right? So in early 2015, I have surgery on my foot. They have to break my foot and reset it.
What happened to your foot?
I had an old injury from a car accident years before that I had never really addressed. So I constantly had an ache in my right foot. It would hurt all the time. The bone on the top of my foot was bent like a rainbow, like this. So my foot was kind of just out of whack all the time. And so it hurt all the time when I walked. And so they were like, well, the way to fix that is to break that bone, reset it. We'll put 2 titanium screws in your foot to stabilize it, and you'll be good to go. And so I went ahead and had that surgery. And after surgery, they sent me home in a boot with a 30-day supply of 10 milligram oxycodone, pure oxycodone pills. And for lack of a better term, I didn't use them as directed. I started taking them as directed, wasn't doing enough for the pain. So I popped 20 milligrams, felt a lot better, but wasn't quite doing it for the pain. But at the same time, I started to feel kind of a little high, right? So one day I took three pills all at once. And that was kind of the threshold that got broken for me, where all of a sudden I went from my foot hurts to I don't have any problems in the world. So any marital problems I had were gone. Any issues with having 2 small children in the home were gone. Any financial problems, and we were having issues with the value of our home because we're still recovering from the whole upside down mortgage stuff that had happened a few years before. So, carrying credit card debt, all those things, because you got kids and you're married and you've got a mid-level job like I had, and my wife had been working and then staying home with the kids and then working. And so our financial situation was...
How old are your kids at the time?
So my daughter, when I fell in 2015, she was 9 and my son was 7. And so basically I started popping these pills on the regular, taking 3 at a time, started chewing them up like candy instead so they'd hack faster. Then I figured out that if you crush them up, you could snort them like cocaine, like a line of coke. Started doing that. And then within about 10 days, my pills started to run out. And so I tried to start tapering off, right? And when I started tapering off, I literally went into withdrawal. And I really didn't like how that felt. I mean, so we're like a week and a half in. I still got food on the ocean, but yeah.
How soon did people notice? Did you hide this from your wife? Were you like...
So I did my best to hide it from my wife. One thing when you start struggling with addiction, and I don't say this to be stigmatizing, I say it to be honest, you become a really good liar, man. Really good liar, good at hiding things. And that's just the truth. In AA and recovery, when you read what they call the big book, they talk about addicts lie, cheat, and steal, right? Alcoholics lie, cheat, and steal. It's true, we do, because your brain gets hijacked by this addiction and it implants itself as one of your basic survival instincts in your brain, right alongside sex and fighting and food. Here comes this addiction, right? And so you'll do anything to not only maintain that and defeat it, but every logical decision that you make has to have a conclusion of where you can either continue to use your drugs or obtain more drugs to continue to use them. That's how I viewed it. That's how I see it.
So it's a whole nother mindset. It hijacks your brain, rewires your brain, and you become a hyper-focused OCD with this objective in mind.
That's right. And you're willing to prioritize it. And it's not even willing. You prioritize it over everything else, including your own family. And that's indicative of what you see on the street today. And when you talk about the drug crisis throughout history, when it becomes that big of a problem, you prioritize that drug or alcohol or whatever over the things that are really supposed to be most important to you in your life. And so then you have to start asking why that is. What kind of pain are you experiencing that you need to do that?
It takes you a while before you get to the place where you can even address those, right?
Yeah, it does. And this is where, we run into problems around how to best treat.
So you're within 10 days, you're flipped and you're into this full-on addict mode, and you've never been, I mean, you've had a tendency, but you never crossed that threshold prior.
Yeah, that's right.
Then what? How long before it runs its course and when you hit rock bottom?
About 4 years before I hit rock bottom. So, I go from that not being able to obviously get more pills from my doctor to Googling up where I can buy pills on the street in San Francisco and having it take me to YouTube and show me Pill Hill, which is Golden Gate, Leavenworth, and the Tenderloin, and starting to buy Roxy, etc.
Knowledge. Wow,
Right.
it made the world better.
Right. Roxy's on the street. And then after I blow through about 100 grand on pills, because my addiction peaked when I was taking pills at about 560 milligrams a day. So by late 2016, I was taking 560 milligrams of oxycodone every single day just to stay well. That's how deep my addiction got. And to give you context, 180 milligram time-released oxycodone tablet on the street is $30. And so I was taking 7 of those pills a day. So that's $210 a day times 7 days a week times 365 days a year. And so I bankrupted myself. I bankrupted my family. I was hiding as much of it as I could from my wife. She clearly knew something was wrong.
She knew something was wrong, but she didn't know what you're a clever liar.
Not just me. Look, one of the biggest things in addiction that people don't talk about is denial. So denial is one of the biggest factors in addiction, and how it affects and how family members react.
So your wife is in denial.
She's
just too hard.
It's too hard. We've got 2 little kids. Our world is falling apart around us. Our house is in foreclosure because I stopped paying the mortgage and was using all the money to buy dope, right? The levee broke. Everything came out, I guess you could say, when we got home one day and they had posted a notice of auction on our front door of our house because the house had already gone into foreclosure, but now they were going to actually auction it off. And my wife lost it, right? And didn't kick me out of the house, but she cut me off from all the money. So I still remember, like, either that night or the next day, I needed to get more drugs because I was out and I was going into withdrawal. And I went down to...
Now, at this point, are you still getting high, or are you just, because I know you get high and then it comes down and you're just trying to get the high to feel normal? Where are you at in that?
It's a combination of trying to get high and not going into withdrawal. So there was a big fear of being dope sick.
Yeah.
Huge fear of that, right? And that's what drives a lot of people out there right now they're using, is that, especially with illicit fentanyl, is that they don't want to get dope sick. The withdrawals from fentanyl are so incredibly horrible, right? They make you feel so horrible. And now oftentimes many of these street drugs are contaminated with things like benzodiazepine, which has its own separate set of really horrible withdrawals. And so it's a double whammy for a lot of these folks that are using that out there right now. I make the decision. I go down to the Tenderloin. I've got $30 in my pocket. My wife's cut me off from all the money. I walk down a block to Golden Gate and Hyde, and I buy heroin. And since I'm diabetic, I have needles at home. I go back to YouTube, look up one of those harm reduction videos on how to shoot up properly. And I started shooting heroin. I became an intravenous drug user at that point. I kid you not. That's how it went down. And the thing is that the video didn't help me because I sucked at shooting up, because I kept missing the vein and I kept muscling the heroin into my body. And every time you do that, you get an abscess on your arm or your leg or wherever you're trying to shoot up. So I end up giving myself sepsis. So I'm also a sepsis survivor. And if you know anything about sepsis, which is a blood infection, only 6 out of 10 people that get sepsis actually survive. So I spent 6 days in the hospital in ICU recovering from that, and you would have thought that would have been enough, but it wasn't, because in the hospital they were giving me dilaudid opioids for pain from all the abscesses and the infection.
Is that right? You're addict at this point.
They knew, but if I don't disclose it to them, they that was the first question they asked me when I went into the hospital.
Did you lie?
Of course. I said, I walked in, okay, so the reason I ended up going to the hospital with sepsis is that I had an abscess. I have all these scars on my arm, and I had an abscess right here on my arm.
I recovered pretty well.
Yeah, so I still got the scars. I still have scars, a couple of blown out veins. It opened up under my skin. And so the fluid in the abscess traveled down my arm, under my skin, into my hand. And my hand swelled up like a balloon. Got really fat. And it started turning blue because the circulation was getting cut off, and I had a really high fever. So I go to the emergency room.
And only 1 in 6 survive.
6 out of 10. So 60% survival rate.
Okay.
Yeah. So I go to the hospital. The first question doctor asked me, "Are you an intravenous drug user?" And I said, "No, I got bit by a spider." I'll never forget. You lied till the bitter end, man, to try to cover it up because I was afraid, right? Fear, like, rules people in addiction. It's like giving into fear, and then you use the drug to get away from those things that scare you in life.
Are you familiar with the work of Dr. Carolyn Lee?
I'm not.
Basically, she's one of the leaders. I think she's from Australia or New Zealand, that region. And she's one of the leaders in neuroplasticity, one of the pioneers in that. Basically, it says that our brain has 2 core emotions. Everything else is built upon them. One is love, and the other is fear.
I believe it.
And it's very interesting. She showed it's
And not to get all existential on you or anything, but it's like I think a lot of people maybe can relate with this. I lived a good chunk of my life in fear. Us older folks call it worry. I was a worrier. That just means you're afraid of things all the time, right? Afraid of the future, things that you can't control, all those things. It's amazing how going through recovery gave me some tools and kind of a guide to live my life differently. And faith is part of that guide for me. But I started living life. It's like you flip the script. You start looking at life with the lens of gratitude, being grateful for what you have, even if it's really small, as opposed to resenting what other people have. And I'll tell you right now that resentment is the root of evil. For me, it's the root of evil. When you start looking at that, oh, that person has a big house and drives that car and has that much money in the bank, and you start, not only wishing for that, but resenting them for having it, which you see a lot of in today's society because of all the inequality that's out there.
Yeah.
It breeds resentment, and resentment is the root of evil. I'm telling you.
Oh yeah. You're not the only one saying that. Yeah. Scientists are starting to see that, and all this connection between. So when did you hit rock bottom? When did the turnaround come?
Basically what
you're in for sepsis, you get.
Yeah.
I think that would be it.
No, I just switched to smoking heroin at that point. I continued to use my wife. Finally, what happened is I left one night from the home. I stole money out of my wife's purse, went down to the Tenderloin, and I didn't come home for 11 days. And the only reason they found me is my wife filed a missing persons report. The cops found me, told me to go home. I get home, my wife's waiting with a packed bag saying, "I got you a bed at a treatment center. You can either go to drug treatment or you can get out." And I opted to leave the home at that point because I was in withdrawal from heroin. So I walk out on my wife and kids, and as I'm leaving, my neighbor serves me with a restraining order that my wife had filed, but you need to have a third party serve you. And now I couldn't go home because now she slapped a restraining order on me for the drug use and the domestic violence as it's associated sometimes with drug use. In that thing, it wasn't like domestic violence in the sense that I was physical. It was more like driving my kids around under the influence of heroin. You understand?
That's dangerous.
Super dangerous, right? So,
it's all these natural instincts that were so powerful. The drug overrides. The addiction, the emotion addiction minds that.
Right. And certain drugs, you have different reactions, obviously, right? But with heroin or opioids or opiates, it's a highly addictive drug that just takes over everything. And that's been throughout history. Like, they've been using opium throughout history, but back in the old West, they had opium dens, and the people that were in there were all strung out too. So I mean, there's a reason why they made it illegal. Why? They stopped making laudanum, right? That had morphine in it, because people were using it as cough syrup, and they were getting addicted to it, right? I mean, it's just,
The reason they stopped putting cocaine and Coca-Cola.
yeah, people getting wired, and yeah. So, and it's like there's a difference in the drugs. There's stimulants like coke and meth, and then there's depressants like heroin and oxycodone and oxycontin. But they all can lead for a subset of the population to addiction that leads to very destructive behavior. That in my case led to homelessness. Once that restraining order happened in January 2018, I was homeless. And I lived on the streets of the Tenderloin for the next 6 months, from January to June of 2018. And I was doing whatever I needed to do.
So in your case,
Yeah.
the addiction was definitely the cause of the homelessness.
Correct. In my case, it was. And I know that it's not everyone's case, but there are those of us that it perpetuated our homelessness. But what I do know too is that drug use, whether you use it, whether it's a cause or an effect of you being homeless, the bottom line is that out of, let's say in California, the 190,000 homeless people that are currently in California, at least half, and that's a conservative estimate by UCSF. I think it's more like 75 to 80%.
The whole, and it's hard to get data on that.
Right. Because it's, well, first of all, self-reported data. So if you came up to me on the street, man, you say, "Hey, Tom, are you a heroin addict?" I'd be like, "What are you talking about?"
Every ex-addict, like yourself, is saying then, they're all liars. I was a liar. We're very, very good at lying. And we're using self-reporting as data. Or 4-time counts. Those are also, voice can vary so much.
Super inaccurate. And I know that they're doing the best that they can, but I also know that data is subjective, and it's manipulated, and it's used to support certain outcomes around the causes of homelessness and what policies should be implemented on the back end to try to address those symptoms.
I prefer to switch that around and saying there's a huge area for growth. And for young technologists, that's one of the reasons I'm so excited to partner with Geo and the House of Web3 and these young technologists. Like, I think if we can improve the data, figure out brilliant ways to get more reliable data and really find, things that are proven to work, we can get a lot more bang for our buck at how we help people. So,
well, I totally agree with that. I know some of the work that they have been working on here to try to create tools so that they can track data a lot better, so that they can present it to those making policy decisions so that they can make better decisions.
Well, one of the best you're a living example. One of the best practices is get the lived experience experts. Nobody knows it like someone who's lived it. And that's probably one of the reasons you're having so much favor and doing so much good. So I'm back to your story. Okay.
So I
Homeless on the Tenderloin for, you said 6 months.
6 months. I started doing what I needed to do to survive out there. Collecting general assistance, food stamps. I was selling my food stamps to the local merchants for 50 cents on the dollar to get cash for drugs. And then the dealers on the street, there's an organized network of drug dealers in San Francisco that are mostly Honduran. They're from Honduras. They're undocumented mostly. I know that some people think it's controversial to say that, but it's not. It's just the truth. It is what it is.
A lot of truthful things are controversial.
That's right. They're associated with the cartels, with the Sinaloa cartel. They have some kind of pipeline from Honduras that brings these kids up here, young kids. So we're talking 18, 19, 20, 21, like that. Some even younger, some a little older, to sell drugs on the street. And there's somewhere between 500 and 1,000 of them in San Francisco, and they work in shifts like a union job, morning shift, day shift, swing shift, and graveyard shift, etc. Most of them live in the East Bay in Oakland, in East Oakland, and they commute on BART to San Francisco to sell fentanyl and meth and crack cocaine primarily. And
Crack cocaine is the primary drug sold still.
No, fentanyl is the primary drug. It's fentanyl. It goes fentanyl, meth, crack. 1, 2, 3. And basically took over the streets of San Francisco, and they've been here for a long time. Okay. But things really exploded when a confluence of events happened with the election of Chesa Boudin as the district attorney here in 2019 and COVID, the pandemic happening. But just to finish off my story, I started getting arrested because they started using me as a drug mule. I was holding their drugs for them on the street, which is a very common thing for homeless street addicts to do in the Tenderloin. They'll hold the stash as a decoy for the dealer. So if the dealer gets busted, he only has a little bit of drugs on him, so the charge isn't so big. And then I just walk away with their stash and give it to one of the other dealers around the corner.
And they pay you for it.
And they pay me for that. They pay me in drugs. So
It would be better for you.
I was getting paid in heroin, in crack, in fentanyl. It was great until I started getting busted. So the police were doing a sting one time. It was April 29th, 2018. I still remember the day. It was a Sunday afternoon. Cops were doing the stings.
What year?
2018.
Okay.
Cops were doing a sting on the street. They busted me. I was holding for 6 different dealers. So I had about 4 ounces of heroin on me at the time. Went to jail. Took the fall because that's the agreement, is that you don't snitch on the dealer. Otherwise you'll get killed, right? I took the fall. I go to jail. I spend the night in jail. The next day I'm out by noon on my own recognizance, back into homelessness on the street. Go back to the dealer, show them the jail wristband as proof that I got arrested so they don't beat me up or hack me with a machete. And they just write it off. They understand that that's part of the cost of doing business on the street. And that started happening to me. I started getting arrested over and over and over every couple of weeks, every few weeks, for either holding drugs or violating the stay away orders.
Once you got arrested, the police are looking after you, or
I'm a mark at that point, right? So I'm literally a mark. And then pretty soon the dealers wouldn't let me hold for them anymore because I'm a mark. And the last time I was out there was June 24th, 2018. June 23rd, 2018. I was out on Eddy and Hyde. And the cops walked right up to me and said, "Are you Wolf?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "You're inside your stay away order. You're coming with me." And they arrested me.
because you're too close to your home?
Too close to the spot that I'm supposed to be staying away from as part of my condition of release.
Too close. Okay, so you kind of go back to where you had been taught before.
I had to stay 150 yards away from that spot. But I was within that 150 yards because that's where the drugs were.
Did you have a band?
I did. I had an ankle monitor, and so they take me to jail. I spend the next 3 months in custody, in jail because I had caught too many cases too close together. I'd been arrested a total of 6 times. I had 4 felonies and 12 misdemeanors pending against me. While I was in jail, they gave me medication-assisted treatment. They gave me Suboxone to help me kick the opioid and fentanyl withdrawals, which it did. And then it just became a psychological thing up here and a spiritual thing in here for me, because the physical withdrawals, the cravings were gone. But, and then it also gave me a chance to sober up and start making some better decisions.
That was something I learned from Nikita, so one of our guests. She was leading the recovery DAO here. Do you know Nikita? I don't think so. Maybe you can meet her at the lunch today. She's an amazing young lady. 28 years she was in and out of recovery. And what she said, basically, the 28 days of recovery were good for her to get over her physical addiction. But really, it's only the last half a week that you're sober and able to start dealing with the root of your addiction, right, which is a psychological, emotional, spiritual thing. Right. And then you're out and you're on your own. Their job's done. They have, and you have and that was where she was really vulnerable.
Yeah, 28-day program wasn't going to cut it for me. While I was in jail, I was offered a choice. I could continue to sit in jail or I could go to treatment. I agreed to go to treatment. I went to a 6-month residential treatment program at the Salvation Army. So I went to kind of a hardcore abstinence-based work therapy.
Now you had already
program
kicked it physically, right, in prison. Okay, right. So you're already sober physically.
Physically, but I wasn't in recovery. There's a difference.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
There's a difference. And I had nowhere to go. Still had the restraining order on me at home. The rest of my family, my extended family, was practicing separation with love because I had been terrorizing them too, stealing from them, borrowing money, not paying it back, sneaking into my parents' house, and that they had to change the locks, and my parents had to change the locks on their doors because I was going into their house in the middle of the night and stealing money out of my dad's wallet to buy drugs. I mean, these are the kinds of things that.
And you guys you and your wife had lost your home, right?
No, so it's funny. It went into foreclosure. It was on the auction block. I was able to sign while I was in jail. I signed over power of attorney to my wife, and we had to liquidate my retirement that I had with the city to use to pay the back mortgage to save the house from foreclosure. And then she got some other help as well to actually maintain our household, so we did not lose the house. So she saved the house, and I cashed out for retirement to do it, and I was happy to do it because by that time I was in jail and I was feeling extremely guilty for everything that I had done.
The guilt too.
That's not recovery though. That's just being sober and then feeling excuse my language, for feeling really shitty about the things that I had done in my addiction to my wife and to my kids and to myself and to my family and everybody, all the harm that I had caused. Okay, tons of harm. And so then I go to rehab, and that first 30 days in rehab, this is why 28 days aren't enough for a lot of people. I needed to sit in the full 6 months, let me tell you. And then time in an SLE after that, a sober living environment after that, a halfway house. It was drug-free after that. Okay, so it wasn't just the 6 months. The first 30 days was just to figure out what the heck is going on, right? I literally had come from 3 months in county jail, 6 months on the street before that. And then before that, a really chaotic, really horrible lifestyle that I was living, where I was hurting myself and my family, losing everything, my job, my career. I'd lost my job. I had an $80,000 a year county job, man. I pissed it away because of drugs. That's the truth. And my story isn't unique. I mean, maybe the circumstances are a little unique, but my story's not unique. You fall into addiction, you lose everything. Addiction doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. It doesn't matter where you fall on the socioeconomic scale. Addiction doesn't care about any of that. Now, the circumstances that could lead you to addiction, that can be affected by socioeconomics. And our response to people falling into addiction can be discriminatory.
Drug use is actually higher. I think the peak demographic for drug use is white males, because during a certain age, because the drugs are expensive. So, but yeah, it's pretty even across the board. It doesn't discriminate.
Do you know Dr. Keith Humphreys at Stanford? He's an addiction medicine scientist and psychologist, etc. He's one of the premier voices of drug policy in the world. Okay. And he released this chart that showed a map of the world. It showed where the highest rates of drug use are. They're all the drug use is in all the wealthy countries.
Yeah.
There you go. There's almost no drug use happening in Central America and South America compared to the UK, France, Germany, the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand are way higher than everywhere else. And that's where all the wealth is, right? And so it's funny because he used that in the argument that some folks will say, addiction really attacks people in poverty more than people that aren't in poverty. And that's just if you take a step back and look at the world, that's not true. That's not actually factually true. There are pockets of where drugs can ravage certain communities, like what happened in the crack era, right? It's undeniable that happened. But that doesn't mean to say that a bunch of rich white folks in Miami weren't snorting a bunch of cocaine at the same time. You see?
It's a complex, messed up situation.
It really is. So I go to rehab. I spend 6 months in rehab.
When was tell me some of the turning points. I imagine there's more than one, but okay, so prison, you're sober, you say your wife saved the house. It was at least a step in the right direction.
Right.
Well,
I was at a big turning point for me. It's kind of silly, but it's not. After you've been in rehab for a month, they have a friends and family day where your family can come visit you. And I got a message to my wife through my dad saying, hey, come to friends and family day so I can see you. Because even though we have the restraining order, Who cares? And I'm going to rehab anyway. That's like a sanctuary. They can't come and get you for that, right? So she agreed to come just to see me because I'm doing better. I'm sober. I have been sober now for 4 months, and I was a month into my actual recovery of being in rehab. She gets about halfway up the steps and she just can't. She's overwhelmed just with emotion and fear and everything. She just can't. She can't bring herself to come see me, which is understandable because I've caused her a lot of pain and heartache, right? And our kids a lot of pain and heartache. But somebody had noticed her and said, "Hey, are you here to see somebody?" She was, "I'm here to see Tom Wolfe." And so they went and got me. And she had waited around outside, and I came outside to see her. And I started talking. All I did was like, "Hey, how are you? How are the kids? I'm here for the next 5 months. I'm doing better. I want to just have the opportunity to start talking to you." And my wife was like tearing up saying, I just don't know. So many things have happened. I managed to do this and that, but we're struggling, the kids and I, your son, my son, Andrew. So this is in 2018. He's 8, 9. He's asking where his dad is. My daughter, who's 11 at that point, knows everything. She's pissed. She's angry. She feels betrayed. And I have to own all those things. And that was a lot for a guy who'd been in rehab for a month to own. And then one of the pastors at the Salvation Army, a Major Darren Trimmer, comes along because he knew I was outside. So he kind of just came out to check and make sure everything was okay. And he's this nice guy. He's like a jolly guy, kind of heavy, just really friendly and gentle human being. And he just comes up to us and introduces himself to my wife and says, "Hey, I just want you to know Tom is a good guy and he's doing good here and he's trying hard. So I just wanted to let you know." He didn't say like, "Oh, give him a chance" or anything. He just said he's trying hard. And for whatever reason, that was a turning point for my wife, because my wife, everything I said to my wife didn't mean anything anymore. Okay. In fact, she told me that. She said, "Your words mean nothing." Right? Because I had fed her so much BS in my addiction. So it was all about action. And he showed that there was some action happening. And that was one turning point.
But that plays a big part in your whole too.
It does. So a couple of months into rehab, like I just, when I'm in a faith-based program, right? So you have to go at this program because it's rigid. It was a rigid accountability program, where you had to get up at 6 o'clock every day. You had to shave every day. You had to tuck in your shirt. You had to comb your hair a certain way, right? And it was actually kind of cool for me, like refreshing, because these are all the things that I knew how to do because I'm already like 48 years old, right? But I had let go in my addiction.
Tragedy looks quite different when you're on the streets.
Yeah, I'll show you my mugshot. I still have it on my father. That was 170 pounds and
we get the editors to splice it in here.
Yeah. Just had a goatee, just looked sick, eyes bloodshot. Wasn't a good look. Well, I feel better now. I can lose a couple pounds. I've gotten a little too happy, but that's okay. I'm healthy. I'm happy. I'm in a good place mentally, physically, spiritually. I'm healthy enough, right? The only drug that I take is Advil when I have headache. I take vitamins, right? I don't, we joke, right? In recovery, we say no dips, no slips, no weekend trips, right? So it's been almost 7 years like that. And that's like the most important thing to me right now, right? Is my recovery, my faith, my family. In that order. Because if I don't have my recovery, I don't have the other ones. And for me, the recovery and the faith thing are really intertwined, right? For me, that's just how I look at my own life.
Well, I think that's what it should all be. I think we should all learn from that. That's the message of the scriptures too. I mean, these people that think they have a faith, but it's a theory, It's like, no, your faith is what you walk out. It's your creed. It's your core things of what drives you. We all have it.
I remember,
acknowledge it or not.
I remember getting down on my knees at church one day, like just asking God to forgive me. And for whatever reason,
this was in Salvation
Army. I asked him to forgive me, or like give me a chance. Like I literally got down on my knees and begged for forgiveness. And You know, it's funny. People that are religious can relate to that. People that aren't, there's a lot of cynical people out there. They just think that, you know, I'm praying to the wall or something like that. But it's about what I was feeling in here, in my heart.
What did you feel when you were doing that?
It was humility. Man, like
Something cleansing about humility.
it broke me down, tears in my eyes. Like I just wanted what was best now for the people that I loved.
Yeah.
And what happened to me at that point wasn't as important, but I knew that if I could find a road back, things could be different and better, because I was finally doing something for me. I spent my whole life worrying about what other people are doing and how they're doing, and dedicating all of my time and effort to my wife, to my kids, and not spending any time, like, you know, every time I wanted to do something for me, I felt guilty about it. You know, wanted to go out with the boys, you know, and go to.
Saying this is
pre-addiction, right? And
you didn't
prior to my addiction.
care of yourself.
Yeah, I wanted to.
Typical of a Gen Xer or generation.
I wanted to go to a Giants game with my friends, right? And my wife's gonna have to stay home with 2 small kids. This is before my addiction, right? I felt I couldn't have a good time because I felt guilty. Instead of just accepting the fact that, wow, this is some time for me and I get to go enjoy this. Couldn't do it. I didn't have the capability to do that.
And then a healthy person is able to, you know, find the balance, you know, get the permission when the life gives you permission. You go out, you enjoy it. And now you're filled, and you come back and you can fill her up. And, you know, then she gets her girl time away. And, you know, you find out what's her love language. Yeah.
And it's so much easier now for me doing all of that sober, because I found, you know, a lot of people say that, oh, when you get sober, you can't have fun anymore. That's all bunch of baloney.
Sobriety is more fun.
I have a good time. Like my life is cool. Like I get to watch my kids grow up. I get to interact with my kids. I get to give them their life lessons.
You ever seen, is that the Adam Sandler movie? I think it's called Remote or Click.
Click. Yeah.
Yeah, to me, he's basically, I mean, he's clicking and he fast forwards over his life. It's a metaphor for addiction, really.
Right. It really is.
To me, it's Adam Sandler and it's a comedy, but like it was like a horror story. It was a horror movie.
I've watched it a couple times and I had difficulty watching it.
Oh, I watched it once. I don't even want to think about it.
I totally relate with you. You know,
yeah.
About how his life could have went one direction, but he wasn't present in his life.
Never present.
And that's just, and how that.
I mean, there is a real empty thing at the end where he realizes he gets to restart the whole thing, and is really just learning from the whole thing. Oh, that's so.
And so, but that's recovery.